Welcome to the Balanced Ambition podcast. I'm your host, Matt Southam. Here, we delve into candid conversations with entrepreneurs, exploring both their business journey and their secrets to maintaining mental well-being. As we navigate the balance of ambition and inner peace, I hope you find insights, inspiration, and invaluable takeaways in every episode. Thank you for joining us. Michael, welcome to the show today. Before we dive into the important work that you're doing in your industry and how you're making some massive strides forward, tell me a bit about you. Give me some context as to your background.
Well, my background is that I was, which will sound a bit funny given the business I'm in now, but I used to be in the banking business, in investment banking, which I did for the best part of 20 years. But I've been a recovering investment banker for longer than I was actually an investment banker. So I think I can be forgiven by now. So I've been in the entrepreneurial business for about more than 20 years, 20 odd years, so 23 years actually. So I'm fairly ancient, so that's why these time periods sound very long. And I got into the entrepreneurial business starting in the telecoms industry, where we did some interesting things in the 90s, actually while I still was in the banking business, but we did some of the early virtual private networking investments to create the world's first global virtual private networking business, which was pretty interesting. Actually, I know Al Gore claims to have invented the internet, but actually we did pretty much in terms of the way it works today. And when we were investing in a company called Equant. So that's a longer story, which we don't need to go into. But and I then went through that into software, and then from software into what is rather laughably known as smart cities. No such thing as a smart city, but software to do with making cities run more efficiently. And that, in a rather roundabout way, brought me into contact with the business that I now run, which is in the energy business, and which with some investors we took effectively out of bankruptcy, but had some fascinating technology in it, which we thought we could develop, which is indeed what we've done. So that's my background. And what I've been up.
So tell me about what it is that you do then. Explain to everyone listening what the general principle of what your product does.
Okay, well, we're in the cooling and refrigeration business. So as I was saying to you just before we started, not many people in the UK think much about cooling and refrigeration, apart from thinking about their refrigerator if it's not working, because we don't generally have air conditioning, and we just assume that our food doesn't go off because we can refrigerate it. And we don't even think about the fact that those big lorries chundering up the motorway with Sainsbury's or Lidl or whatever, Tesco's on the side, which are refrigerated and moving all our food around, or where that food is stored. But that is not a position that can be taken in quite a large part of the world, where it is simply too expensive for people to afford refrigeration and cooling. So what we have, and the reason for that is because they can't afford the cost of fuel to provide the electricity to run conventional cooling systems, whether it's building cooling or refrigeration. The consequence of which is that, actually, just to put this in context, if you think in Nigeria, where we're very active, the price of a litre of diesel has gone from 300 naira a litre to 1,800 naira a litre.
Wow. In
the space of the last 18 months. And you can imagine when we complain about when our fuel goes up a few p a litre.
Yeah.
Imagine what that does to people when that price goes up. And this is not just about their cars. This is about the fact that the grid doesn't work very well or is non-existent in large parts of the country. So they rely upon generation. So what that effectively means is they can't afford to run generators to provide things like the electricity to do conventional cooling and refrigeration. So where do we come? Well, what we have is a patented technology. We own the patents for this technology, which allows us to take the heat from the heat from the hot exhaust gases of a generator or an engine and turn that into coal through our patented absorption chiller. So that generator or engine, which is chundering away to provide the basic electricity, is losing 50% of its value, of its power, in heat in the exhaust. So it's why you don't go and touch the exhaust pipe on your car, unless you're an idiot, when it's been running, because you will burn yourself very badly, because the temperature, the exhaust gases are coming out at 500 degrees centigrade. So we take that heat and the energy which is within those exhaust gases, and we put it to useful work. We turn it into useful work. We turn heat into coal through this machine that we have. And it's a principle, the absorption process, a thermal compressor as opposed to a mechanical compressor, which has been around for a very long time, but we haven't invented this. What we have is we've redesigned the process so that we can we can literally plug the exhaust of an engine or a generator, which is just an engine, a truck engine, for example, is like a big generator, a big diesel generator, static diesel generator, like a big truck engine. We can plug that into the back of our machine, and we take that heat and the energy in those exhaust gases, and we use that to run the machine, and then we chill water, which is then used for refrigeration or building, cooling, air conditioning, etc. So that's what we do. And we have a number of other products that we do, but that's the core of what we do.
Yeah, and I guess refrigeration is essential to keep the life of food, increase the sort of lifespan that it's got.
Well, yes, absolutely. And in fact, in Africa, India, large parts of Latin America, a good chunk of Asia, food loss, just to distinguish what food loss is as compared to food waste. Food waste is what we do because we're too lazy to look at the sell-by date, or because we cook too much and can't eat it all and throw it away. Food loss is and that's not a big issue in the developing world. When you're poor, you don't waste a lot of food.
No.
Food loss is what happens between farm and market. And in those parts of the world, it runs at, on average, 50%. And in some staples, 65%, like tomatoes, for example, in Nigeria, which is a big producer of tomatoes. So if you can imagine that, if I lose 50% of what I produce, then I have to produce 50% more, which means I have to grow 50% more, I have to transport 50% more, and so on. And of course, I then lose 50% of the other 50% more that I had to produce, and so on and so horribly on, in a sort of desperate doom loop. What it also means is that in countries which should be self-sufficient in food, they find themselves having to import food. So in Africa in particular, where most African countries have terrible balance of payments problems and weak currencies, which are a function and a cause of that, they have a really serious issues with this. I mean, Nigeria, which has a large coast, Kenya, they import lots of food, lots of fish. They shouldn't need to do that.
No,
they shouldn't need to do it. If you take something like, and this all comes down ultimately to the lack of electrification, the lack of power, lack of access to power. So we're enhancing the access to power by using what would otherwise be wasted to produce something which would otherwise be very power hungry, cost hungry, and which you therefore can't afford. And we make it affordable because essentially we're making cooling free at the point of use. So to use the sort of NHS analogy, the NHS is free at the point of use. It isn't free because somebody's got to pay for it. But here, the cooling itself is basically free.
And I guess this has quite an environmental impact, doesn't it? Because obviously, food, stopping that decaying and actually being used, and to be able to take, what is affect waste, that the heat from an engine, and convert that into some sort of good is quite a sort of green way of producing that energy.
Well, it is. And actually it goes even further than that because, well, first of all, food, when it rots down, produces methane. And methane is 25 times worse than CO2 as a greenhouse gas. And, rotting meat and rotting fish are even worse than rotting vegetables and fruits. So there's a sort of scale of awfulness in this. But thinking about the environmental impact, what we're now moving into is to look at what people refer to as the circular economy effect. So if you think about somewhere like Africa, where 30% of GDP is, on average, is agriculture. Now that's massively more than it is in Europe or the US, where it's a few percent of the total economy.
Yeah.
And 70% of people work in agriculture, whether it's, they're on, working their own small holding or working in bigger concerns or in processing industries and so on. So it's agriculture is massively important. It's critical to the whole of Africa. You have, as a result of, and under any circumstances, you have lots of agricultural waste from, when you pick it, harvest it, process it, and so on. That can all be turned into energy by anaerobically digesting it, or if it's dry waste, by pyrolysis and something like that. So you can turn your waste, and that applies also to manure, so cow manure, for example.
Okay, yeah.
You can turn that into gas, into biogas. So you've really got your source of energy lying around, literally lying on the ground in piles.
Yeah.
Whether it's still wet or it's dried out, doesn't really matter. So you've got that, and we can then take that, and then we can create gas, which then provides the power to run the process. So if I take an example of a dairy, for example, that we're currently doing, that dairy has power needs because it's got milking sheds and it's got lights and so on. They've got 1,000 head of cattle, roughly speaking, and they need to milk them. They also then need to cool. They need to process the milk. They need to keep it cold, etc. So they have cooling, refrigeration requirements. So at the moment they're using partly grid access, so electricity, and partly diesel, because the grid is not available all the time because it's off. Let's say on average 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
Imagine the price of those diesels has gone from 300 to 1,800 naira. You're in trouble. That's where your profit is going on your fuel cost. So we come along and we put in a system which allows us to turn the cow poo into gas, which then provides all the power to replace the diesel generators that they would have backup. We then take the exhaust gases which come out of the back of the generators, because it's a generator like the diesel generator. It's just now a gas generator. It's biomethane. Yep. And we use that to run the chillers, so they get the cooling for free, which reduces the overall energy use. So they go from being in a position where they're spending a vast amount of money and essentially barely breaking even as a result of, or possibly even losing money as a result of the fuel cost, to the point where we're saving them probably overall about $300,000 a year.
Wow. So, I mean, as well as this, you obviously, there's a financial implication here, as you've just mentioned. But for you on a personal level, do you feel that the work you're doing now, that the infrastructure and the things you're putting into place is actually doing real good for people and the world? Is that a big personal motivator for you?
Yes, I mean, it is, because it's a lot more satisfying to do something. I mean, let's be clear, we're in this business to make money. But
yeah.
But this is, and this is, by the way, extremely important. I always think this is a very, very important consideration for people. Whenever people talk about environmental impact, impact and wanting to help the environment. But I can tell you that and actually, frankly, this is true everywhere, but it's particularly true in somewhere like Africa, where people are on the edge, usually. You go along and say to people, look, you really have to do something about your environmental impact. You're using all these diesel generators, and really, this is not on. You can't do this because you're destroying the planet. So we want you to be even worse off, so that we can all benefit from that. Now, you can imagine that doesn't go down terribly well, because if you say to somebody, you need to be poorer so everybody else can be better off, they're simply not going to do it. So this is the point about the money side of it, the economic side of it. If it doesn't pay, people are not going to do it. But if you make it pay, then they will do it. They won't necessarily do it for the environmental purpose, but the consequence will be that the environmental purpose is served because you've made it worth their while. And the other point about this is there's no point going to somebody and saying, look, here's a nice spreadsheet. It will pay off and you'll be better off in 5 to 10 years' time. Again, you're not going to get anywhere doing that.
No.
So the key point about that example of the dairy that I gave you, the payback period is 1 year, 12 months. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if you go in with that and you say, this is what we're going to do, and then if you, on top of that, you can even say to them, okay, maybe you don't even have to pay for it. We'll deliver it to you as a service. So you pay monthly, or pay quarterly.
Yeah.
Then they will do it because they can afford to do it. You've got to find ways of getting over this hump. So if you take, and I mean, I don't want to do down other types of renewables, but there is a real problem with solar and wind, which is that they cost a lot of money to put in. So you've got a big capital cost, and the payback period is very long, and it's highly sensitive to interest rates, as we've just seen with Ørsted, the big Danish, world's biggest wind farm player, who've just announced that if there's a 3% rise in interest rates, they're basically bust. Their business model doesn't work. Now, if you imagine if you're in Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, Tanzania, Ethiopia, whatever you want to pick, West or East Africa, and anywhere else in Africa for that matter, interest rates are in the teens and in the high teens. So this is a real problem. So this is why this whole biogas, you're using agricultural waste.
Yeah.
Then generating the cooling from the exhaust. So we can't get away from the fact that those generators that you're running off the biogas are inefficient. There's only 30%.
No, because they're needing those to pretty much survive.
Yeah,
so
exactly. But we can make them more efficient by reusing the waste. So basically what we're delivering is waste to energy squared. So we take the waste, the agricultural waste, we generate energy in the form of gas from that, and then we generate energy from the waste of the waste, from the waste exhaust gases. So you get this marvelous enhanced circular business. And because you are, first of all, it doesn't cost very much to install it, and then and you've got and the implication the cost lowering implications, the lower costs are so significant.
Yeah.
How much you're lowering the cost, that it pays you back very, very quickly. So which means that you get this great leveraging effect of doing this. And to your point, it's not just about the money, it's about what it then does to people. So if you start reducing losses by being able to do this, you will help people. So if you imagine, if I'm a farmer and 50% or 60% of what I produce is being lost, that's obviously reflected in the price that I get for my kilo of tomatoes, for my cassava, for my ginger, whatever it may
Yeah.
be. If less is being lost, then ultimately it's not going to happen overnight, but I will get a better price. There will be more value left. And the interesting part of this, actually, if you think about it, is that let's say I save 1 ton of tomatoes from being lost. So a ton of tomatoes, or 1 kilo of tomatoes
Yeah.
in Lagos is worth about $1, between $1 and $1.50. It depends on the season and so on. But let's say it's $1. So a ton of tomatoes, you can work out what that is. That's 1,000 kilos. So that's $1,000. Okay. One of our machines, if we reduce food loss by 20%, not eliminate it, but just reduce it by 20%, will, on average, avoid 350 tons of produce from being lost. So that's $350,000 of food that you now have to sell. You've got to sell, which otherwise you wouldn't have. And that's not $350,000 where you make some tiny little margin. That's straight to the bottom line. That's profit.
Yeah.
Now think about how much difference that makes.
Yeah. I mean, that's transformational.
Yes. And therefore, and obviously, if you don't lose all that food, you don't have to import food. You're going to have less food problems. You're going to be able to feed more people. It's going to have the effect you need to transport less. You need to use less water to produce food because you're having to grow less. You need to use less fertilizer and so on and so on. You have less food rotting down, less greenhouse gases. It's a virtuous circle instead of a doom loop. That's what it is. So it is extremely important. But if you don't get the numbers right, then it's just fine words.
Yeah.
If you want,
I can really see how.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I can really see how it does need to work on a financial metric as well to get the buy-in, so that it benefits people financially and benefits the environment as well, and then therefore everyone else in the world. So tell me a bit about you, as in, what do you do outside? Because obviously you're in this for profit, and I'm always pro-profit, and in a business, that's how we need to operate. We need to be sustainable. We need to push forward. You're equally doing some good as well. What do you do outside of work? What sort of motivates you? What do we need to know about you?
Well, I mean, for unsurprisingly, running we're still a small business, and I spend a very large amount of time doing this, but I try and keep myself fit and healthy, but I cycle a lot, I try and do at least 100 or 150 miles a week if I can.
That's not cycle. That's quite a lot of cycling.
Yeah, I like doing longer rides. So and I used to do a lot of ski touring and climbing and so on until my knees went. I've now had both my knees replaced, so I'm getting it's effective age and bad genes, so osteoarthritis. But there we are. So, but I can still manage, and cycling is actually very good for that because there's no impact. So it's
and keeps things moving, doesn't it? There's movement without the impact.
Very good for the recovery and so on. So I do a lot of cycling. I have I travel a great deal because of the business. I'm currently in New York, where I spend in the US, a fair amount of my time. So I'm constantly traveling, and then I have children. Well, they're not children anymore. They're all adults, and I have grandchildren. So
Oh, wow.
I was watching my youngest grandchild demonstrating just how fast he can crawl, which is extremely fast, across a flat surface today. Before, of course, crawling straight into something head first, as small children will do.
Yeah.
Didn't stop him for very long, but there we are. So I do. So there's that, and I try and I read a lot, and because I spend a lot of time on airplanes and things like that. So
Yeah.
I'm a great fan of podcasts and audiobooks as well, for the same reason.
Ah. So, I mean, you obviously keep very busy because of work, and you just said you travel and you put in a lot of hours. I suppose that the question is, what's the next step? How long can you do you think you'll keep going, putting in long hours? When will this really become, a big game changer, or a well-known game changer?
Well, of course, I mean, in a sense, that it doesn't. The thing is, the hours don't get any shorter, because the more you have, the more there is to do, the more you have to do. So,
yeah.
But at some point, I mean, I'm not young anymore, so I do have to recognise that somebody else should be doing more of the heavy lifting. Not that I'm suggesting that I'm the only one doing the heavy lifting. I'm not at all. I have a very, very good team who work extremely hard as well. But I need to hand over to somebody else to do most of the stuff, and then I can then do what I love doing, which is appearing on things like this and enjoying the sound of my own voice. So.
Yeah, man after my own heart. So. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I want to finish just with, if you could give a tip to someone running a business. Obviously, you've been an entrepreneur for a while now, investing and getting involved in businesses. What tip would you give someone looking to start a business?
Well, I'm going to be very boring and very practical in this.
No, that's good.
Do a really proper financial model. And when I say a proper financial model, I mean, and if you can't do it, as most of us probably can't, get somebody who can really do it, and do it down to the nth degree of detail. Because it's only in that, because the thing that kills most smaller businesses is running out of money. And it's not necessarily running out of money overall, because it might look fantastic overall, but that your cash flow lets you down. So if you don't know how the business works to a very low, small degree of detail, when do I have to pay my VAT? When do I have to pay my national insurance? Apparently tedious details like that. It matters whether if I have to pay my suppliers up front, but I don't get paid by my customers for 90 days, that's a problem.
Yeah.
You deal with Tesco's, and if you're selling to the big companies, they will screw you as much as they can by not paying you for months. And that makes it, so where's the money going to come from? How are you going to run out of money? And in that process of creating that really detailed model, you're forced to ask yourself questions about and discover how this business that you're trying to create will actually run on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
What happens if if I'm running out of money in that month, why am I running out of money? Have I made the right assumptions? Have I got the right margins? Am I charging enough? Or am I charging too much and my sales are not going to grow quickly enough?
Yeah.
It forces you to ask those questions, because it's all very easy for us to get terribly enthusiastic about how fantastic particularly it's tech. What are tech people always interested? They're interested in how their tech works. That's the other tip I give. If you're in tech, nobody cares how it works.
No.
The customer doesn't care. He wants to know what it does for him. Now, that's something that most tech entrepreneurs never understand. And so they spend their time telling everybody what these marvelous flashing lights are doing and how clever it is and all this sort of stuff, instead of saying to the customer, okay, this is what it's going to do for you. That's the other tip. But the main one is understand how your business is going to work from an operating point of view and from a financial point of view, so you don't run out of money. Then you can work out how much money you need to make it work. That's the other thing. So
work backwards.
Let me be clear, I have not always got this right in the course of my career. So, it's one of those things, do as I say, not as I do, in some cases. But that's what I would.
Well, we don't always get it right, though. But you are, on the money as such with regard to cash flow. I think that the majority of businesses do struggle with cash flow in those early years, and without knowing, having a bit of a picture of knowing where that cash flow problem is going to hit. Often it creeps up on you when it's actually too late to do anything about it. Exactly. If you can predict, like you say, 90 days, I'm going to get that. Okay, what do I need to do over the next 90 days to reach that mark? Because suddenly if you're, maybe 60 days in, you've run out of money and you realize there's another 30 days until you're going to get any, you might be stuck. So having a good financial insight is key.
We all think suddenly you've got what appears to be a lot of money sitting in the bank account. But it's amazing how quickly it disappears.
Yeah. No, that's a really good insight. Michael, thank you so much for joining me today. I've really found the conversation insightful. I didn't know about the sort of, refrigeration and being able to convert that energy. So that's been a real learning for me. And I think your insights into the understanding your finances is key. So thank you so much for joining me. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
I've enjoyed it as well.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Balanced Ambition podcast. I genuinely hope the stories inspire you as much as they inspire me. If you found value in today's conversation, please share it with a friend. And remember, by subscribing, you won't miss an episode, and it would truly mean the world to me. Stay balanced, and I'll see you next time.